Hey all, welcome back. It's Monday, which means it's project time with the expedition project. My name's Roger. Let me know that you're hearing us and reading us loud and clear. Tonight we are back with EWT, or the Endangered Wildlife Trust. If you missed our last live stream with them, go back and check it out. We spoke about camera traps the last time, and tonight we're going to check out Wendy and talking a little bit about protecting the protected. So let's have a look. Wow, it's a fascinating video. Wendy is back with us. Hey, Wendy, how are you doing?
Hi, Roger. I'm good. How are you?
Very, very good. Keeping warm in Louis Tricard?
Yes, you can see that I've got my fleece on because it's absolutely freezing here.
So very excited about your chat tonight. Last time you were with us, a little while back, you spoke about camera traps, and tonight you're talking about protecting the protected, I believe.
Yes, and that was quite nice that you introduced it with the video, Roger. I think a lot of people are a little bit confused to what's going on now. So hopefully my presentation will clarify some things and introduce some of the exciting research that we've been doing to protect the protected.
Definitely. Okay. So a couple of favors for everyone that's watching. Just give us a little shout to say that you're online watching us. Maybe just tell us where you're watching this from, where in the world you're watching this from, or where in South Africa you're watching this from. Would be great to know. Also, you can start putting your questions together while Wendy's going through a little presentation. We won't get to the questions straight away, but as soon as she's finished with her presentation, then we're going to start answering some of those. So have a think about what you might like to ask her. And then also remember that organizations like EWT and her branch at Wildlife and Transport, as well as the Expedition Project, we rely on people sharing these stories, public support, collaborations, donations, all that kind of stuff. That's what drives organizations like ourselves. So if you are watching anything tonight and you think it's interesting and worth sharing or passing on to someone else, please do. It really does help us. So Wendy, let's crack on, I think. Over to you. Are you ready to go?
I am good to go, yes.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got your presentation. It looks good. All yours.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, Roger. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for the presentation. I hope there are some audience who saw the previous work that I presented on, as well as some newbies. So Roger showed you the video at the beginning that sort of will give you a clue as to what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is protecting the protected and about driver behaviour. So something that video showed lots and lots of people in vehicles, and it was in protected areas in South Africa. So I just want to give you a little bit of background before we launch into the actual work that I've been doing so far. So firstly, Roger, I just want to acknowledge you and say thanks for the Expedition Project, for inviting me to do this presentation. It's really, really valuable that we get to talk about our work, particularly the work that I do, which, you know, let's face it, it's not the most glamorous, looking at, unfortunately, dead animals on the road, but it is an opportunity to spread the message of the critical research that we're doing. So thank you. Okay, so who am I? My name is Wendy Collinson, and for those of you who are from South Africa, you will notice that I am not a South African. You can tell by my accent that I'm English. So I'm originally from the UK. I've been in South Africa for about 15 years. But prior to that, I used to be a sports teacher in a high school in London. And about 15 years ago, I made the decision to have a career change. And that career change wasn't just to go to another country and teach in another country. I really wanted to do something different. And so therefore I left my family, who are still all in the UK. And sadly, I was due to visit them in March of this year, but because of the lockdown, I wasn't able to come over. So as I'm sure many of you've had travel restrictions. But I came to South Africa, where I initially started work assisting with research on large carnivores. So these were lions, leopard, cheetah, hyenas. And it was an incredible learning curve for me, working alongside other researchers. And initially I was only supposed to be in the country for 3 months. And that 3 months turned into 15 years. And there's an expression that we have here in South Africa, is that Africa really does get under your skin. And for those of you who have actually been fortunate enough to travel to the continent, I think you'll agree with me. When you come here, there's just something unique about this place, and it really, really gets to your heart. And I never actually went home again. So, as I said, I started working with carnivores, but whilst I was doing that research and driving around on a lot of the rural roads, I started to notice a number of animals dead on the road. And I started to gather this information and record it and start to monitor it on a daily basis, and then started to actually realise that this was a major problem, not just in South Africa, but across the entire world. And consequently, this then led me to do a master's degree in South Africa, where I was looking specifically at roadkill. And this was also part of a project with the Endangered Wildlife Trust. So my history with the EWT goes right back to 2005. And once I'd completed my master's, I then carried on with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, where we developed the Wildlife and Transport Programme. But as a part of all this history, and this is how I know Roger, back in the day when I was working on my master's, so 13, 14 years ago, that was when I bumped into Roger when I was doing all my field work. And here's a picture of us together. I think Roger and I both look substantially younger in that picture. I think Roger also has quite a bit more hair. So we've known each other a long time and sort of been in touch with each other on and off all through the years. So I'm not sure how many of you are listening from Africa or how many of you have actually visited South Africa, but I just want to put things into perspective as to where exactly we're talking about. So South Africa is right at the bottom of the African continent, and this arrow is actually where I live. So I live right up in the far north, adjacent to Botswana and Zimbabwe. And a little bit of information about the actual country. We are a population of 59 million. And interestingly, the UK, which is substantially smaller than South Africa, your population is much bigger than ours. We have 11 different languages. Be very interested to know how many of you could actually list all of those, but that's a question for another day. 9 provinces. So in South Africa, we call the individual areas a province. In the UK, we know them as counties. And South Africa is the 24th largest country in the world. And I've included here the road network because that's what I'm actually talking about. I'm talking about the impact of roads. So in the UK, there's almost 450,000 kilometres of roads, and you compare that to South Africa, where there is 362 paved roads. But if we take our unpaved roads, which are the dirt roads, that figure doubles up to almost 700,000. So that's a little bit of background information about South Africa. And who are the Endangered Wildlife Trust, the organisation that I work for? Well, they are a South African conservation NGO. That's a non-government organisation. And we operate primarily in Southern Africa, but we also have projects in various parts of East Africa, and some of my colleagues also work off the continent as well. And you'll have noticed that this is our logo. So you saw this at the beginning, and you'll see this on all of my slides. Quick question. I know none of you can actually probably shout the answer at me because you're all muted, but I wonder how many of you know what paw print this belongs to as the logo of the EWT. And this is a different paw print that I'm showing you because I'm now going to show you the difference. So the EWT logo is a paw print of a cheetah. Now, the reason why it's a cheetah is that the very, very first project, which started in 1973, was the Cheetah Project, and hence why we use the paw as our logo. And the reason why I've put the paw up on the left is because there's a significant difference between cats and dogs. So for all of you who've got cats and dogs back home, after my presentation, you can go and have a look at their paws and compare them. Because if you look at the bottom here, this is how you tell the difference between a cat and a dog. A cat has those 3 lobes at the bottom, and a dog only has 2. So you'll probably be grabbing your cat or your dog later on to have a look at the bottom of their feet just to test that they are a cat or a dog. So that's a bit of a background as to who I am, how I got here, how I met Roger and the EWT. But more specifically, within the EWT, I manage the Wildlife and Transport Programme. So the main purpose of the work that I do is to look at the impact of transport on wildlife. So when we're talking about transport, we're talking about roads, railways, ships and aircraft. But primarily what I do is with the roads and the railways. That's my main focus. So just a quick question, and it may seem obvious, but not everybody really thinks about it in the context. Why do we actually need transport? Cars, railways, aircraft, trucks, and also shipping. I mean, it's pretty obvious, I think, but it's actually critical for developing economies and also the transport of goods and people. So that's why we need transport. So basically what I'm saying to you here is that the Endangered Wildlife Trust Wildlife and Transport Programme is not against transportation. It's critical that we have it for our economy to develop. What we need, though, is to find a balance between an efficient transport system and wildlife and animals to be protected. So even though we need an efficient transport system, it does come with negative consequences for wildlife. And I've split these into two categories, direct and indirect impacts. So the direct ones are probably something that most of you would be very familiar with. I mean, I don't know if many of you have seen anything like this, but if an aircraft takes off into a flock of birds, that can have major damage on the jet engines. And obviously, if a vehicle hits an animal on the road, it will often result in its demise. So that's a direct impact, and it's the most visual one, and probably ones that most of you would actually have witnessed in your lifetime. The indirect impacts are the ones that are less obvious, and also something that only becomes apparent over time. So the poisonous gases that come out of vehicles, not only can they have impacts on animals, but it can affect the plants that surround the roads. And a road or a railway can actually act as a barrier between many animals. If you think about it, the animals were there first, and it was us that put up a transport network, sometimes without any consideration about an animal's natural movement pattern. So animals have territories or home ranges, and these home ranges are historical. I mean, if we think about the wildebeest migration in the Serengeti, those animals move back and forth because it's part of their history. And it's the same with animals where a road is. They'll cross the road regardless because it's part of their range. But often then what happens is when that road gets constructed, that's effectively a barrier. So you are preventing the animals from crossing. This may therefore impact their population, and they're unable to breed, or even their genetics may be affected. I just want to link this to the situation that we find ourselves currently in, where we have to maintain social distancing. I want to compare a road to COVID-19. COVID-19 is effectively the barrier for us at the moment. We have different restrictions in different countries, but ultimately most of those restrictions involve some form of social distancing, and that barrier is created by a disease. And if we transfer it back to transport, the barrier is a road. So the most obvious impact of roads, as I said, is the direct impact, which results in a roadkill. And one of the main things that we're trying to do at the EWT is to actually understand why roadkill happens. And one of the ways we do this is through gathering roadkill data collection. So effectively driving a road and counting the number of carcasses on the road. And then that gives us some baseline data, a snapshot of what animals are most at risk and what areas of the country. This is a platform that we use for members of the public to get involved with helping us gather this information, because if we think about it, it's incredibly difficult for even 10 researchers to drive every single road in a country. It's not physically possible. So we rely very much on members of the public to help us with reportings, and this is one platform that we use through a cell phone app. And as a result of that, we can then start to plot all of these roadkill reports onto a map. And you can see the map on the left is a map of the reports that we've had from members of the public. The darker areas are where there's lots of roadkill. And then the map on the right shows what we call a heat map. It actually picks up those areas where roadkill reports are highest, and potentially as a researcher we would then go in and do more intensive studies. So that's how we work through gathering our information. We're also very active on social media, and I think we're all very conscious that social media can be an incredibly powerful tool for gaining information. It can also be a very dangerous tool where you can anonymously attack people and be quite derogatory in comments. So I'm quite active on social media where I try to update people about our research as well as other research that's being undertaken in the rest of the world. And I also often pick up some roadkill data information. And this was really how the project that I'm going to talk to you about now developed. It was purely as a result of social media. From images like what is in front of you here. This is a picture of a hippopotamus that was run over by a truck in one of our national parks, actually in the Kruger National Park. And as you can see, it didn't survive. And a lot of the comments there on the right are actually in Afrikaans, which is one of the languages that we speak in South Africa. But basically you can see that there are a number of comments from members of the public who are furious. They're really upset about seeing images about this. They're shocked, and there's an outcry for something to be done. Now, up until seeing images like this, I only thought roadkill actually occurred on our regional and national roads. I didn't imagine for 1 minute that it was happening in national parks. And it was only as a result of the social media that I started to realise that more and more roadkill was happening in the parks. And it came as quite a shock to me, because at the end of the day, our national parks are supposed to be the custodians of biodiversity. So this was how the project evolved, purely as a result of the public outcry on social media with images like this. So back in 2014, this was when I started to notice the images on social media, we designed a 6-year project called the Roads and Parks Project, where we identified a number of parks across the country. Now, for those of you who have visited South Africa, or even if you haven't visited South Africa, if I were to say to you, name a national park in South Africa, all of you would probably say Kruger. I think it's one of the most famous parks in the world. Kruger has almost 2 million visitors a year, and it's about the size of Wales. So it's a very, very large park. But we also decided to include a number of other national parks because they all have different species, they have different habitats, and they also have different types of visitor or visitor volumes as well. Kruger is probably the most visited. And then if we look at some of the other ones, which is Table Mountain, which is down in the Cape Peninsula, we've got Pilanesberg, number 1. There's Dinokeng, which is just outside Pretoria, Shishlui and Mfolozi, which is in KwaZulu-Natal, and Addo Elephant National Park. So you can see they're dotted all over the country. And just to actually clarify how the national parks work in South Africa, because I know many people get confused about what a national park is. A national park in South Africa is usually surrounded, the actual perimeter, by electric fencing. And usually these parks are self-drive. So many of them you can't actually walk around in. And the reason being is that we have dangerous game. These are the big five. So you've got your lion, your rhinoceros, elephant, leopard, and buffalo. But there also are a number of other dangerous animals. So hence why a national park would be fenced. And once you're in the park, you would then have to remain in your vehicle. I know some nature reserves in England and also in the States, you are able to walk around in them. But this is the difference between other countries and South Africa. You have to remain in your vehicle, which is why we have a number of problems in our parks or protected areas. So I want to talk to you tonight about some of the research that we did in Pilanesberg and how we went about trying to solve one of the major problems, which was animals being run over on the roads. So to start off with, we just drove the roads to get an idea of how many animals were actually being killed in the national parks, given that it's not supposed to be happening. So this was over a 30-day period. And over the 30 days, we found almost 140 dead animals. Most of them were amphibians. And then, as you can see, we also found reptiles, birds, and a number of mammals. So that was the first thing we did, just to give us, again, a snapshot of actually what was happening. We then did some questionnaires with some of the drivers in the park. So this we undertook at one of the cafes, where we went and asked people a number of questions. But I just want to highlight two questions here. We actually, the main things that we were interested in was, given that roadkill happens in the protected areas, we were interested in, well, why does it happen? Why do what's people's perception of why roadkill happens? And firstly, we found that almost 99% claimed that speeding was the reason why roadkill happened outside protected areas. So that's on your regional and national roads. And then similarly, 97% said it's still speeding that causes roadkill inside the protected areas. So given that these were the answers that members of the public gave us, we then set out to test this. So working with a company called Syntel Traffic Monitoring, they actually donated some traffic counting devices to us. And you can see these rubber strips on the road. These are very clever. They actually record the speed at which a vehicle is driving at. They record the number of vehicles that go through, so the traffic volume, and they also record the weight. So it can tell you whether it's a car or a delivery truck and so forth. So these are what we had lying on the ground. Of course, they didn't come without their challenges, because on a number of occasions when I was driving around the park, I sometimes came across my traffic counting devices completely ripped up and destroyed. And I wonder if you can guess who was responsible for this. Yeah, one of these guys. They weren't happy with these devices being on the ground, so they obviously had a little bit of fun and came and ripped them up. Now, clearly this wasn't helping me, because I really needed to get this traffic information, given that members of the public had said that speeding was the problem. I really needed to find this out. So I did a little bit of research myself to find out what might deter elephants from destroying my tubes. And I discovered that elephants apparently don't like chilies. So I made my own very strong chili oil, and every single day I went out and sprayed my traffic loops with chili oil, and believe it or not, it kept the elephants away. So I was able to gather my traffic counting information, and this is what I found. Now, on this graph, you'll see two different colours. You'll see the orange, which is the light vehicles, so your cars, and the blue line is the trucks, the heavy vehicles. Remember I said that the traffic counting devices can give you information about the weight of a vehicle. The x-axis, which is the line at the bottom, gives you all the different times that a vehicle drove over the traffic loops. And then the y-axis going up the side there gives you the number of vehicles that exceeded the park speed limit. Now, the speed limit in Pilanesberg National Park is 40 kilometers an hour. Now, if we just look at this, you'll see there's 2 points where it peaks. Around 12:30 to 1 o'clock in the middle of the day, and 8:30 to 7 o'clock in the evening. Now, for those of you who have visited national parks, you'll probably know the reasons why this happened. But for those of you who have never been in a national park, the reasons why this is likely to happen is because in the middle of the day, it gets very hot. Animals usually disappear and go off in search of shade, so you won't actually see anything. And that's when people go back for their lunch or go and have a little rest or go to the swimming pools. And then at the end of the day, for the people who are visiting the park for just the actual day, so a day visitor, the gates close. And often there's a frantic rush for the gate to make sure you make it in time before that gate is closed, because if you don't make it in time, you get a fine. So that would actually make sense as to why there were those 2 spikes. Now, I just want to show you this little graph quickly, because this shows you the number of vehicles that were actually speeding. So you can see here, I'm just popping up all the vehicles that were within the speed limit. So all those green ones, they were people that were driving within the speed limit. Those people that exceeded the speed limit, we can see it wasn't substantial. It was mainly exceeding the speed limit between 40 and 49 kilometers an hour. So it's not excessive. So in my opinion, speed wasn't the main cause of why roadkill was happening in the park. It may explain some of the roadkill, but it certainly doesn't explain everything why it happens. So that then left us as researchers kind of scratching our heads thinking, well, if it's not speed, then what is causing roadkill? So after scratching our heads for a while, we kind of started to think, well, how do drivers respond when they are in national parks? And for those of you who have ever visited a national park, you're usually driving very slowly, and you're usually looking from left to right, because you're busy scanning the bush on either side of you to see where that wildlife is. You're rarely looking at the road. So given that that's how people usually behave in the parks, it would make sense that anything that is actually on the road, they don't see it. Now, this is effectively a theory. So again, you've now got to test this theory. That is this therefore how drivers are behaving? And if it is, what can we do about it? Now, one of the only things that you can do to actually change driver behavior is to actually warn them or give them a sign to show that there's an animal in the area, so therefore you need to be a little bit more alert and pay attention to the road. But the big question is, do they actually work? Now, this is one of the most common signs that we have in South Africa. It's actually a kudu. And I think if we think about some of the signs that maybe we have in the UK, I think you guys over there, you have a similar thing, and it's a deer. And one of the problems that we have with signage like this that's very common is that drivers generally become habituated to it. So you see it, you might notice it the first time, but the 10th or 11th time that you drive by it, you don't even notice it. you become so used to it. And then you start to forget that it's actually warning you to be careful, that wildlife is around. And before you know it, an animal either runs into your vehicle and you get injured, or the animal gets killed, or even both. So given that this is very, very common signage and people generally don't respond to it by changing their behaviour, we started to think about what we could do then to potentially get people to look at signage in a different way and actually change their behaviour. So based on our knowledge of animals that were being killed in the parks, we chose 4 different animals. So on the left there, we can see a snake, followed by a cheetah, then a mongoose and a chameleon. So we elected to use these photographic images and warning people that they were entering a roadkill hotspot. At the same time, we also used the red triangle, which is the typical warning sign that we have pretty much across the world. And again, rather than having the picture of the deer or the kudu inside, we went for the same 4 animals. So there's the chameleon, the snake, the cheetah and the mongoose. And we wanted to test all of these images. It seemed quite excessive though, using all of these signs. So given that the project actually started with social media, we went back to good old social media and asked members of the public to vote on the most popular sign and the least popular sign. So basically what we were asking them to do was, if you saw an image of a chameleon on a sign, would you change your behaviour? And by contrast, if there was an image of a mongoose, would you change your behaviour at all, or would you just carry on driving as normal? So given those 4 images, we did a poll on Facebook, and I wonder if you can think which was the most popular out of the snake, the cheetah and the mongoose or the chameleon. So which one would people say, yes, if I saw a photograph or a silhouette in a red triangle of that animal, I would definitely change my behaviour and drive a little bit slower. So look at this. The snake was not very popular. In fact, it came in last position. And if we look at the cheetah compared to the mongoose, and then finally the chameleon, we can actually see here that the cheetah was the most popular one, with members of the public saying if they saw an image of a cheetah, they would definitely change their behaviour. However, if they saw an image of a snake, they would be highly unlikely to change their behaviour. And in fact, I even had people saying to me, and if we saw a snake, we would definitely drive over it. So that's the perception that we had from members of the public and what we based our study on. So we created 4 different signs. So we used the red triangles with an image of the least popular, the snake, and the most popular, the cheetah. And we also had photographs with the snake and the cheetah. And to test how drivers responded, we laid on the road a fake rubber snake. Now, for those of you who tuned in early enough, you would have seen that video with a fake snake on the road and us observing driver behaviour. So what happened when they saw the snake on the road? Did they swerve? Did they stop? Did they drive over it? Or did they miss it? So that's what we were interested in, what people's reaction was to the snake. So first of all, we counted people's response to just the snake on the ground. And then after that, we put up our warning signs. So this is what we found, and this is what gets really, really interesting. So first of all, when we had no signs put up at all, so there was no image of a snake, no image of a cheetah, we just had our fake plastic snake lying on the ground, 35% of almost 6,000 drivers changed their behaviour. So clearly, 35% of those people saw the snake on the ground and they either swerved or they stopped. The other 65% didn't notice it and they were busy looking at the bush from side to side and they drove over the snake. When we put the signs up, 61% of drivers actually changed their behaviour. So here we can show that our signs were successful. And this is even more interesting. It was actually visitors to the park who were more likely to kill the snake than the staff. And one of the ways that we were able to discover this is that most of the staff vehicles are actually, they have the park logos on. So that's how we were able to monitor that. And this is the final punch home message of what's really interesting. A sign depicting a snake was most effective at reducing collisions. So this goes against completely what we found on our Facebook poll, where members of the public said they would change their behaviour if there was an image of a cheetah. We actually found the reverse to be true. People actually changed their behaviour when there was an image of a snake. So from this, we have learned that signs do make a difference, and what is on that sign clearly influences driver behaviour. And certainly going forwards, it's a decision that the national parks now need to make about how and where they deploy these signs. We are proposing that they are not up for the whole year, but are put up temporarily and they get moved around so that drivers don't become habituated to them. And it's certainly something that can be rolled out to not only other protected areas in the country, but maybe to other national parks in the rest of the world. So this was our Break for Wildlife campaign. We do need your help. Members of the public are critical in supporting us with our work, but I would like to thank you for listening to my presentation. Hopefully I can answer some of your questions now, but if I don't get a chance to answer all your questions, or you suddenly think of a question later, then please feel free to contact me on my email address here. And again, thanks to the Expedition Project for inviting me to give this presentation, and don't forget to check out our websites. And for those of you who missed the video at the beginning, I think, Roger, if we can maybe show it again, and then it will put it more into context as to the work that we did, and then some of the actual findings that we found with how people did actually behave in their vehicles with regards to our fake rubber snake on the ground.
Definitely. Let's have a look again now. Good idea, Wendy. Here we go. You know, it's interesting. You said at the start that you know, your topic that you speak about, you know, isn't the kind of the topic that most people would think would be, you know, so fascinating and stuff like that. You know, as you sort of said, the least sexy of all the kind of the topics. But I tell you what, from the research and the stats that you've been showing, it just proves that the work that you've been doing, it does have the results. I mean, that's exactly it, isn't it? So, I mean, and actually super interesting at the same time. I would like to say from that video that I'm so glad to see the Land Rover was the one that stopped. Good to see.
Yeah, definitely. I did actually, here is one of the snakes.
Oh, wow.
Can you see it? One of the ones that survived, because we did actually lose a few, Roger. I think you saw in the video there that pale chanting goshawk did actually fly off with that snake. So,
poor goshawk. I bet you have a lot of fun trying to scare people with that snake, though. Your husband was happy with you having that around the house.
We did actually have somebody take a photograph of one of our snakes, and they posted it on the Pilanesberg Facebook page asking for identification, which I thought, you know, that just goes to show how realistic it was. And they wanted to know, because, you know, people will wind their windows up because they think it's a real snake. So they can't clearly, I mean, I certainly wouldn't be hanging out of a window looking at a live snake, you know. So, yeah, we did have a few chuckles to ourselves.
Okay, are you ready to do some questions? Are you keen?
I am, yes.
Okay, let's have a look. So we'll just scroll back. Got a question way back at the start, actually. Tanya said, just wanting to get a bit of context from you. What made you choose South Africa, Wendy?
To be honest, I think South Africa chose me. I was, as I said, I was a teacher. I was looking to do something different with my life. I obviously was earning the pound and had quite substantial school holidays, which I made full use of, did lots and lots of traveling. And I was starting to get bored of being a tourist. And I know that's really awful to say, but I felt I wanted to do something different. And Tanya, it's bizarre, but I was looking in this travel magazine and this page fell open at volunteering for 3 months in South Africa. And I thought, oh, that sounds quite cool. So let's give it a try. And I really did give it a try, because I didn't just go for 3 months. I actually resigned from my job. So there was, you know, I completely burnt my bridges. I always knew that if things didn't work out, I could just get on a plane and come back to the UK and find another teaching job. But like I said, it was almost a fate thing, if you believe in fate. So it found me rather than South Africa, you know, me choosing it as a destination. That's the only way I can explain it. Bizarre.
Would you encourage people to do similar and really just going with that gut instinct to going across the world and following that kind of dream? Or
I don't know, Roger. I mean, I think, Roger, I was in a fortunate position, as in I don't have I don't have children. I do have fur children now. Like, I've got 8 dogs, so they're my children. At the time, I wasn't married, but I am married now to a South African. So I think it very much depends on your circumstances.
Sure.
and the risks that you're prepared to take, and also, maybe the things that have happened in your life to shape you. I'd gone through sort of quite a traumatic incident that sort of made me stronger, and therefore gave me courage to think, you know what, I want to do something different with my life, and I'm going to do it. So, sometimes these challenges that get put in the way of you in your life, you can look at them negatively and sit down in a corner and cry, or you can use it for the positive side of things and think, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to do something different. But I mean, I guess that's also someone coming from a privileged background saying this. If the worst case scenario happened and I had to have got back on the plane, my family would have been there for me. So I do realise that I was also fortunate. But
Well,
it's a
well
gamble.
done. Thank you for
Gamble
sharing.
that paid off.
So Brenda from Gansbaai, and also from Marine Dynamics and Dye Island Conservation Trust, she has this to say: truck drivers are purposefully driving over mole snakes on the road, and her road, the roadkill in her region is often batia foxes, and sometimes you see a tail of a striped polecat as well.
No, Brenda, thank you for that. I mean, you do get very different species in different parts of the country, obviously. And it's interesting how Brenda's brought up the bat-eared fox. For those of you not familiar with a bat-eared fox, I mean, they look very much like our British foxes, but they do have enormous ears. That's why, hence why it's called bat-eared. And they often wander around in large social groups. So where you see one bat-eared fox, you'll often see three or four others, because the mum will often be with her offspring. And so it's the bat-eared foxes are quite common, sadly. And the same with snakes. I mean, I know Brenda said specifically mole snakes, but snakes have a habit of basking on roads. Like a road surface is very, very warm, so they'll often lie on the concrete because it's quite hot. And it's interesting how Brenda's brought this up about drivers purposely driving over snakes, because I had a student who was working on another project for me, still using the fake snake. But what he did, rather than putting it in the middle of the road and watching driver behaviour, he actually put it on the road verge, so actually off the road, and he recorded the number of drivers that deliberately swerved off the road to deliberately kill the snake. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in South Africa, the snake is viewed with from many certain cultures within the country. It's viewed with suspicion. It's people, they're often misunderstood. So even the non-venomous snakes, people will deliberately kill. So there's certainly a lot that we need to do, not just with regards snakes on roads, but snakes in general. I mean, to actually educate people that, not all snakes are venomous, and even the venomous ones can be removed safely. So I mean, I am a bit of a snake fan, but yeah, they do get quite.
Not everyone is, exactly. Yeah.
No.
I was interested to see. Now, I mean, I can obviously understand, snakes and chameleons being on that top list. I was fascinated to see the cheetah being on there. Why is that?
Well, as in a roadkill.
Yeah, I mean, why is it up there as being like one of those ones you wouldn't think that would even be affected at all by roadkills? But are you saying that it is a common sort of thing, that common animal that does get hit?
And I mean, this is what's so interesting, Roger, that I mentioned earlier that a lot of our properties are fenced. So some properties have electric fencing, others just have normal what we call game fencing, and it's about 2.5 meters high, and they're designed to keep animals in, but animals have their methods of getting out. I mean, elephants certainly will just push the fence over. Some animals jump over. Our warthog will make holes underneath, which allow other animals to go through. And animals like the cheetah, as part, as I was talking earlier about home ranges, not all, and just because there's a property there, the animal doesn't necessarily choose to live on that one property. As part of their home range, it may extend to the other side of the road. And cheetah and leopard, in fact, a lot of your large mammal species or your carnivore species often live on a number of properties. We call them transients because they move between properties as part of their home range. So in that instance, a cheetah would be quite common. It would go through a fence, it would end up on the road, it would either get stuck on the road or it had managed to make its way through the fence on the other side. But 9 out of 10 times they just get caught on the road.
No, go on.
No, I was going to say, yeah, it's quite common.
I guess I would have thought that they would be a little bit more reactive than some of the other animals in not getting hit, I guess, but clearly I'm very wrong. Wow, that's
I think
interesting.
it's just because they get startled. They're if you think about cheetah, you wouldn't necessarily find them in urban areas where there's high traffic volumes. So it doesn't take a roadkill of a cheetah to be in an area where there's lots and lots of traffic. I mean, it can be in a low volume area where, you might only have 200 vehicles traversing that road in a day, and yet a cheetah's going to be at risk because it's hanging around in that area, it goes to cross the road, it's not expecting a vehicle. So, I mean, there's various reasons. I mean, there might be prey on the road, there might have been a roadkill already there, and the cheetah's going to go in and feed on a carcass that's there. So there's multiple reasons why it may happen. But yeah, carnivores are very susceptible.
So Tanya opens up another interesting point. Now, obviously, there's going to be, or had been, fewer cars on the road during lockdown. But I wonder if there's going to be a spike now as animals are starting to not see as many, or haven't seen as many cars on the road, so becoming a bit more relaxed, and then all of a sudden the traffic picks up again. So you might find this massive spike of roadkill again, but not just because of an increase of numbers, but because of the animals getting a bit more relaxed about their situation. Maybe, do you think that might be the case?
Roger, I love this question. This question is being debated all over the world by road researchers. Because we're all in the same position. Animals will generally exhibit different behaviours around roads. So you'll get the animals who will cross regardless of whether there's vehicles in high volumes or low volumes. They're going to cross that road, and they either get across safely or not. And then you've got animals who we call avoiders. So again, regardless of the traffic volumes, they'll take one look at the road and think, not going to cross, and they'll go back into the bush. Now, what we're actually finding is exactly the point that Tanya is raising, is that lockdown does mean fewer vehicles on the road. So potentially those animals that we call avoiders are actually starting to get confident around roads, and they're hanging around on the road verges. They're not being scared away by traffic volumes. So the big question that we now need to ask is, what happens when traffic volumes return back to normal? Will those animals go back to being avoiders, or will they have learned that they can potentially browse or graze on the road verge and then become a roadkill? So we may actually be seeing new roadkill species in the future. And the point that you made about a spike or reduction in roadkill, we've definitely noticed a reduction. But as I said, we've started to notice different species being killed on the roads because they wouldn't normally be there. So this is as a researcher, what the positive that I'm finding from the situation that we're in at the moment, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to gather this data. We're never, well, hopefully we're never going to be in this situation again. And as I said, there's loads of researchers around the world asking this same question. So it's going to be really interesting times when this is all over to see what this means, and potentially the outcomes then from the transport agencies. What would they learn from this, and will they work with the conservationists for maybe looking at how we can go forwards with what we've learned from the situation at the moment?
Yeah. I know in a lot of the times when I've been driving in sort of quieter areas and everything, I've noticed that tortoise has been quite a main animal. Are they on the top of the list of kind of affected by roadkill?
Yeah, they are quite high up, but generally tortoise are very seasonal specific. So often you see them on the roads, particularly, and this is what I've noticed, and some tortoise experts may differ in their opinion, but usually just before the rains, you'll see tortoise literally running up the hill, running up hills on roads, because they're seeking higher ground, and that's often an indicator that the rains are coming. And then lo and behold, a week or so later, the rains suddenly come and the tortoises have reached the higher ground. And one of the ways to reach the high ground quickly is to get onto a nice flat surface, without any stones or holes in the way. And that's often why they'll be out on the roads, actually seeking that higher ground. I mean, also they'll be on the roads because they'll be looking for mates, and it's during their breeding period. But that's one thing I've noticed: tortoise is literally running up the hill to get to safer areas.
I bet when you started this kind of research, you had no idea that it was going to involve so many different factors. It's actually fascinating, I must say. It really is.
I had no idea. And that's the beauty of research as well, which is why I love the job that I'm doing, because there's never a full stop. So once you've done one lot of research, there's then another question that comes from that which needs answering, and you think you've got to the end of it, and then there's another question. So just like the work that we're doing in the protected areas, that was part of a presentation that I gave tonight, but there's loads more questions that have come out of that, which we're now trying to answer in other protected areas of the country. And it's research is always evolving, and there's going to be other researchers come after me that maybe prove some of the things that I've learned wrong, or they agree with me, or they try something else. So that's what I love about research. It's constantly evolving, and anybody who criticizes your work, you shouldn't see it negatively. It's about being progressive and taking things forwards.
About your signage, Wendy, and I mean, such an amazing job with the way you moved away from that traditional signage to ones that might be a little bit more, people might be a bit more receptive of, or a bit more aware of when they saw it. And also, just on a side note, it's so interesting to see that the polls were the complete opposite of the results, which is interesting. But when you guys come up with an area that needs signposting, or you need more signs, is that something that EWT and your department has to pay for, or do you put that forward to the government or to sandparks, and then they cover it? I mean, is it your responsibility or not?
Roger, it has to come from the park. I mean, basically, as an NGO, you are totally reliant on support from donors or funders or grants to undertake your research. Sometimes within that funding, there is some funds that you can use as resources for your project. So in this case, I elected to have a few signs made up, but then going forwards, for these to be deployed in a number of parks across the country. And, we're not just talking like one or two signs, we're talking like 20 odd signs. You would have to then seek another funder who would either support that and therefore support the park, or the actual park itself would pay for them. So, you're always looking for financial support from various directions, be it a corporate organisation or directly from the park, for the outcomes of what you find to then be implemented. And, that's one of the challenges that you face always with funding. So, and that's the next step that we're working towards, to actually getting these permanently deployed.
And would a park like your, series of parks like Sand Parks or Cape Nature or anything like that, would they approach you and say, look, we want to put up more signage, what do you recommend is going to be the most effective signage? Would you be that portal that they'd go through, or would they just do it and then you'd only see it later and then have to say, oh, that signage might not work?
No, I mean, I think because we've been working in this field for almost over 10 years. And because we collaborate very closely, not just with my work, but other programs within the EWT with Cape Nature and Sand Parks, we have quite a strong partnership, and consequently, because of that partnership, there's always communications between us. So it wouldn't be a case of us going ahead and just doing something, or vice versa. You know, in fact, for all these projects to take place, we actually have to gain permits and permission from the parks in the first place to actually go in there and do this work. So you know, it's a mutual partnership, which is incredibly valuable, that, you know, we're all on the same page.
How, in just a couple more questions, but one more from me. How far do you think it is down the line for parks actually stopping private vehicles, or would that impact tourism too much?
That's a tough one, Roger. It's a really tough one, because I think, I mean, if we think about the current situation where South Africa is losing huge revenue because of the COVID-19 situation, there are so many people out of jobs. So many of our national parks are losing so much money, and we're not just talking about staff salaries. We're actually talking about being able to conserve various species. You know, to actually then go down the route of not allowing private vehicles in the parks anymore, it's all, you know, it would almost be a foolish decision, given that you need to claw that revenue back. Yeah. But then you have got the flip side, that it's a lot of the private vehicles are causing the problem. So we could be using this period to be educating people, or getting our ducks in a row at the gates, at the information centres, about how we go about educating people, so that when the parks are open again, we hit people hard with, look, okay, there's been a number of unacceptable situations involving wildlife collisions. These are the things that you now need to abide by in order for us to allow you to drive privately in the park. So, you know, I think there's various scenarios that we could be thinking about during this reflective period, but potentially, if there aren't any changes, then we could be looking at no more self-drives or private vehicles in the park, if people don't change their behaviour, because at the end of the day, we have to conserve our wildlife.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. So any final words from you, or any sort of call to action, any way you want to direct people, you know, something you're up to that you want to bring awareness to, anything to finish up?
Oh, well, hopefully you'll invite me back again, Roger, because as you know, I've always got things to talk about. I've always got so much to say.
And it's always interesting. That's great.
No, people must just go onto our Facebook page, the Endangered Wildlife Trust Facebook page, and check out our website. There's loads of other programs. I mean, we have about 100 staff. There's about 50 field workers deployed across the country doing lots of interesting things. As I said, you know, some people get to do the really cool, charismatic, sexy projects. I get to do the gory stuff. But I mean, we've got a fantastic team at EWG. So, you know, for those people who are interested in the work that we're doing as an organisation, go and check things out, and feel free to contact my colleagues and get in touch with them, see how you can help. But, you know, if you want to help me, then find out what's going on in your prospective countries, not just in South Africa, but I think pretty much every country in the world is concerned about what's happening on the roads. And there are definitely other organisations gathering data and looking at what's going on your road. So wherever you are in the world, you can definitely support initiatives that are going on. And if you're not sure about who to contact, I'm sure I can help you with who you need to contact in your respective country.
Awesome.
But yeah, no, thanks, Roger. Much appreciated.
Thank you again. Thank you again. We'll definitely have you back again, and can't wait for your next topic. Wendy, thank you so much again. To everyone out there, thank you for watching once again. Keep spreading the word and sharing all the details that you've heard. That would be absolutely amazing. Just a reminder that when we finish off this live stream, the footage that you'll see at the end is unique to the person that we do have on, like Wendy. So there's actually the footage that's going to be on the credits section of this was taken close by to where I actually first met Wendy, right up on the border of South Africa and Zimbabwe sort of area, right up in Aldays. So look out for interesting little bits of footage at the end of each live stream. But from me, thank you very much, Wendy, once again, and we'll see you soon.
Great. Cheers, guys. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.